Writing a good story is hard. Making a good movie is hard. Transforming one into the other is even harder. Welcome to Adaptive Difficulty. This is a show where a couple of book lovers take on the challenge of adaptations. I'm Cameron, and with my friend Josh, we explore the difficult and sometimes bizarre choices that happen in the course of making an adaptation. This week, we are exploring Blade Runner, a 1982 film based on Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, a novel from 1968.
Hello, I'm Josh.
And I'm Cameron. And I hate this movie.
Had you... What?
I hate this movie.
Had you seen it before?
I've not seen it before.
Okay. Because I feel like this is another one where the movie supersedes the book's reputation. Like, Blade Runner, the movie, is a more famous movie than Electric Sheep is a book. Does that, you agree with that?
I mean, that's certainly true, but I like the book quite a bit. And I think because I read the book and then saw the movie is why I don't like the movie as much. I feel like if I had seen the movie just on its own, I would have been like, okay, I can kind of see what's going on.
See, this is a little bit what I was worried about, because I think the movie is fine, but I'm not that big of a fan of it. I've seen it before when I was younger. Well, I say younger. It was the time the sequel was coming out. I watched the original movie around the same time. And even then I didn't love it. Like, I didn't immediately think it was like one of the best movies ever, like a lot of people act like it is. And then, watching it this time, I guess is one where I'll have to just get it out of the way fast. I was like, man, the book was way better than this.
The book is so much better than anything. Because the book actually has like a thought and like a purpose.
And I'll say, this is one where we might have to put a pin in it and do a follow-up where we just watch the sequel for a quick episode, because I think I haven't seen it since it was in theaters, but I liked 2049 better at the time that I saw both of them. And I think maybe it's actually more thematically linked to the book than the movie. Yeah, original movie.
This one was all they took were words, and even they changed some of the words. It's not a bounty hunter, it's a Blade Runner, which honestly, better name than bounty hunter.
Yeah.
That's the one
perk I do give them credit for that. Yeah. There was a book called Blade Runner that I think they had to get the rights to the name of, but it was actually about a mule who runs blades across a border.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they use their capitalistic pressure to steal the copyright and then use it for something else.
Yeah. And then I hadn't read the book before now, so that's my prior experience with Blade Runner is I watched it once and thought it was pretty good and saw the sequel.
I did not see the sequel.
So before we dive into more comparison, well, we don't have to spend too long on it, but any thoughts about the book as just the book itself?
I mean, I like the book a lot more than the movie, because I think the book is a lot more capable of having intense thoughts about it. The kinds of questions they ask in the book are a lot different than the kinds of questions they ask in the movie. And I'm more interested in the book's kind of setting and its kind of implications than I am, which is kind of the movie's I don't want to say generic future setting, but it is kind of a generic future setting. They kind of get rid of the apocalypse kind of setting, because in the book it's nuclear war has happened, so the Earth kind of been destroyed, and they kind of have to live on Mars or colonies, and then unless you're one of the
movie, it's more of the Earth is overcrowding, so now people live off world, which is more, I guess, of a stock setting for sci-fi.
I honestly think that kind of ruins a lot of the joy you get out of the book with the kind of just the amount of sheer loneliness, which I think is the major theme of the book, is that it's just gone when you have
when I was watching the movie, I was like, you know, his apartment building in the book, they talk all the time about how he's like the only person who lives there. And I guess I didn't notice whether they described the rest of LA that way, but like that was how I assumed it was just like the characters we're following in the book are like some of the only people around practically, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, is his name Sebastian in the book too? I assume his name is Sebastian in the book.
No. The equivalent of Sebastian in the book is named John Isidore.
Oh, that's right. Okay. It's been like a week since I've read this book. So the names are starting to go out of my mind. But like, yeah, it's supposed to be kind of like, these are the people that are left behind, and there's not a whole lot of them. Everyone who's like, anyone has moved on.
Right. But like, not drawing a comparison, just like my first thought about the book was, I guess I expected it to be very like golden age sci-fi, like really purple prose, you know, kind of emotionally deadened, if that make, you know, like clever sci-fi concept, but like bad read, if that makes, like almost like, you know, Alan Dean Foster, or not that I've read a lot of Asimov, but like I get the sense that he is kind of that way. And it wasn't like that. Like it was almost more like Vonnegut, almost like not quite as like personal in the narrator, but like it had a sense of humor and sarcasm and like irony and metaphor that I just didn't really expect, which I appreciated.
There were points in like the book where I was very surprised with kind of how the author was like taking it, and you know, I think it comes out in a little bit in his prose, but yeah, it's one of those more enjoyable reads than I think a lot of science fiction, because a lot of science fiction I think falls into the trap of, well, it's science fiction, so I have to explain everything.
Right.
I think it's like bogged down in that kind of explanation, but I don't think this book really does.
Yeah. And then the second thing that really, well, maybe this is the first thing that really jumped out to me. I had always just assumed, because I knew the name of the book as like a trivia fact, like, oh, the name of Blade Runner's book is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And I just assumed that was like a cool sounding name to gesture at like the theme of, you know, do robots have dreams? Like, is AI human? There is so much literal electric sheep in this book that I just like did not anticipate.
And you get a little bit of that in the movie where it's like, oh, it's an electric animal.
Yeah.
They don't ever explain why they're all electric, because they're like electric in the book because all of nature has been destroyed.
Right. The book, it's actually the opposite in the movie, because electric animals are like expensive and prestigious.
You don't even really, like.
Although,
really see
the lounge dancer does also mention that she couldn't afford a real snake, so I guess real animals are even more expensive.
Yeah, it's like, again, it's like bits of here and there that are like, okay, here's a subtle reference to the book, and then we're kind of doing our huge own kind of spin on it that I think kind of leaves a lot out. Also, this is a sidebar, we can get to it later. She had sex with a snake, right? That's what's happening?
They said something about like, see her
get the pleasures
extract the pleasure of a snake.
Philip K. Dick would never.
And then, but anyway, the point is the electric animals in the book are cheap. They're not expensive remotely, was my impression.
Well, I think
the maintenance.
I think they're expensive, because I think
just less expensive than a real one.
Yeah, because it's all like a status symbol kind of thing, where, you want to have some kind of animal. If you are really well off, you can afford a live animal because they're very expensive. They take a lot of time. The Earth's kind of destroyed. There's not a lot of things going on right. So having a live animal is like, oh, I can kind of provide for this kind of thing. And barring that, if you don't want to be an outcast, you have to have a electric animal because, you can't be seen as poor.
Right. And it does all lead to one of the only quotes I noted down as I was reading, which was Rick is trying to like get through to his wife and like make her care about something because she's in like a depressive spiral. And he says, She doesn't care whether we own an ostrich or not. Nothing penetrates. And I will say, we both watched, like we recommended in the previous episode, the final cut of Blade Runner from 2007. The theatrical cut had a voiceover narration that most people say is bad. But it is possible that it explained the animal thing.
It probably did, but
so
I'm never
I don't
a
know
fan
that it was
of like narration that kind of covers up the holes of things you should just kind of explain through, visual storytelling.
Right. Well, they didn't want to add it. I mean, the studio didn't tell them that's like an urban legend or whatever, but they would have preferred not to add it, but felt like they needed to not confuse people. And there was even like an urban legend that like Harrison Ford phoned it in because he hated the idea of adding a voiceover.
I'm sure he was on the phone when he was doing it.
So it was like super boring. But he's been like, no, I did the best I could. I just like it shouldn't have been there, so it's bad.
I think Harrison Ford should narrate the opening crawl of Star Wars 10.
Okay. No one's narrated them ever before, and I pray to God he won't be in Star Wars Episode 10. But
that's why it'll be epic, because it'll be like his Force Ghost or whatever. Moving back to the book, I think, what's your takeaway as to the theme of the book?
I think there's a lot of themes in the book.
I know.
I feel like I'm trying to think. I mean, I think it really boils down to this feels like a cop out because the word is said so many times in the book, but like empathy and like, is the capacity for empathy what makes us human? And if it is, like, how do we define or realize whether something is showing it or not?
Okay. Because I mean, that's like the whole test in both the book and the movie is like, they ask you a series of questions, and it's not really like designed. It's designed to gauge your like emotional response to your empathy towards situations. They ask you kind of provocative questions.
Yeah. Which was also the questions in the book are almost exclusively questions about the treatment of animals. Mm-hmm. Like eating an animal is a complete complete taboo in the society at this point because most animals no longer exist.
I think it was like you're at a banquet and there's a boiled dog.
Yeah, they do ask that one in the movie too.
That's why I remember from like the book as well. Or the calfskin wallet.
Yeah. I don't think it's as obvious in the movie that that's the general theme of every question, which maybe was deliberate because like they ask the one, and it's in the book too, about the paint, like your husband loves this nude painting and hangs it on the wall. And, but they don't ask the one about the mother, like list 5 adjectives for your mom. That's only in the movie. Because there's supposed to be situations that in the book, it's like they cause you to have an immediate like disgust response if you're human, and they can measure that in like the micro fluctuations of your eyes. And I think in the movie, it's a little more genericized than that. So they ask different types of questions. But I also think that extends to, because you're saying, well, that's the test, empathy. But, well, first, before I add to that, what were you leading to as the theme?
To me, it was more kind of looking at, and I don't disagree with the empathy thing. Again, there's lots of themes in this book. And I guess it plays into empathy, but it's like the ability to form like connections with people. So like, when you look at like everyone in the book, except for the androids, ironically, they're all like incapable of having like real relationships with people. Like, Isidore can't have a relationship because he's mutated and is viewed as...
He's a special, which is the book's euphemism for a special needs person.
Yeah.
Of some stripe.
And, Deckard can't talk to his wife.
Yeah. And his wife is like... They have a machine that you can like dial what mood you want to be in. So in theory, you can just dial, I want to watch TV all day, or I want to be happy today. but she like prefers to let herself. She'll even schedule depressive spirals for herself, and then once she's in the depressive spiral, she doesn't want to change her mood thing. She doesn't want to get up and change it. So they're disconnected from that.
Which honestly kind of like, I respect the desire to have the wide range of emotions and not just the overly positive ones. Because,
yeah.
I mean, the whole like controlling your emotions so you only feel good things is like a classic like sci-fi trope thing where it's like, it's not actually not that great.
It was very like, this book in general had more like dystopia genre vibes than I expected, because like the movie, it's obviously like not a great society, but it doesn't really feel like dystopian as a genre.
It feels like it's like it's a society that's kind of, it's generally negative, but it's not like overtly like destructive towards its own people.
Yeah, it's not like there's like a government or a corporation in charge that's like implementing these things in a dystopian way. It's just like a bad situation. But in the book, it had some like Brave New World like parallels, like the mood board compared to like the pills you can take in Brave New World and stuff like that. And even some of the messianic
we've not even talked about Mercer, imagery. I guess.
Yeah, well, that's where I was going to go, is like, in addition to the empathy thing with the Voigt-Kampf test, which is in the movie and the book has this whole religion called Mercerism, which is founded after this guy named Wilbur Mercer. And what it is you like, you just like sit in this box that you hold the handles of, and you watch Wilbur Mercer climb a hill, and people are like throwing stones at him, and he's falling over as he tries to get to the top of the hill, and you're supposed to like empathize with the struggle that he faces, and then it creates like, out of everybody empathizing with the struggle, it creates this like collective unconscious, I guess, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So again, there's the theme of like the ability to connect and like empathizing with Mercer as the central idea of the religion.
And then there's the big plot twist at the end where the androids who are there have tried to prove or are watching someone prove that all the Mercer stuff is fake. It's, it was staged by, it was filmed by some corporation for some reason that no one knows. He's none of it's real or whatever. Although, pin in that.
We're putting a pin in that. Do we have something else?
Well,
to talk about
the pin in the fact that it's not real, because there's that whole dream vision sequence he has.
Oh yeah. Well, I was gonna say, first of all, with the whole why is it not real, I didn't look it up to confirm any of this, but I was almost like, he might be taking a shot at Scientology. Like,
I mean, I almost think that's. I don't know enough about Scientology to tell you exactly when it began.
In the 50s, and this book was written later.
Okay,
but when it would have been starting to gain some relevance.
On some level, I think maybe, but on another level, it's like it has almost nothing to do with like the structure of Scientology as I know it, where it's like.
Yeah, but there was also like around the same time that it gets revealed to be a hoax, there's something about like, you thought he came from another star or something, which like there is some like cosmology type stuff in Scientology. So
yeah,
but
I think
I just thought maybe it was like one sci-fi author just like saying like, dude, you need to cut that out, to like his fellow author.
That makes sense. I think part of the reason, the reveal is that like the androids are there, and they're hoping that this kind of like destroys the humans or whatever, because they like had just disproven their god, and that's not what happens at all, because like humans, clung on to it still, and it's almost in a sense where it's like and he says a little bit to this later on that it doesn't matter if it's actually real, because just the belief itself kind of makes it real. Where like it's all these people having this like empathetic, like emotional reaction, and that's like powerful enough to have like an effect on the world. Yeah.
And there's the main character, Rick Deckard. ends up like, he's kind of given up and it's just like wondering at the end, and then he ends up at the hill and like having like a I am Mercer experience, like, becoming this messianic figure. And it's not clear to what extent this is all in Rick's head versus we're supposed to believe it happened to some. Did you did you land on that?
So I think the part where he's climbing the hill, I think he's actually climbing the hill, but I think most of that's just in his head, because I think at the very end he's like, to me, he's contemplating suicide in that moment because he's gone through the a great emotional kind of change where he's starting to see the replicants as basically human. So there's nothing that he can really kind of do anymore. He can't do his job anymore because he can't. It was fine whenever he saw them as just pieces of plastic or whatever, but once he sees them as people, he can't really handle it. And so I think he was going there to end his life. And I think up till the point at the very end, he finds it's a toad, and toads are like completely extinct. There's no mention of toads anywhere in the world. Previously, early on in the book, we had seen that the fact that there was an owl, and that was also supposed to be something that was extinct, and it's revealed later that it's just an animatronic by the corporation.
Yeah.
And at the very end of the book, this is also happening at the very end of the book, he takes the toad home and shows his wife. He's all super excited about it. He's like, this is a gift from God. No one could possibly have done this. And it's revealed that the toad is also just an electronic animal. So to me, that's kind of signifying, none of this is real. All of it's in your head. Again, that doesn't necessarily make the change that happens any less significant.
Right.
Because, at the very end, he's still alive now as opposed to before, where he probably was on his way to die. The only thing I can't square away is the vision he has whenever he's trying to kill the androids, and Mercer just kind of appears and it's like, there's going to be one behind you. And then there is.
I did read that Philip K. Dick apparently just started writing a book and then did not look back. So maybe he just forgot where he was going with that one.
It could be like a weird, he's operating on some kind of weird, sixth sense kind of situation where he's so in tune with the hunt that he's perceiving threats before they appear.
Right. So I think this is a good place to launch into just the character of Rick in both. Mm-hmm. Because the one thing I think is interesting is I think Rick in the book being so into owning an animal and wanting to own an animal, putting money down on them. He carries his book of the price of animals around with him. He's very concerned with that level of keeping up appearances and just wants to have the equivalent of a picket fence lawn and a nuclear family is in this society. And I feel it gives him he's a bounty hunter by day, but it takes the edge off of his character a little. It humanizes him and makes him he's almost boyish about it in some scenes. Whereas there's nothing like that in the movie to take the edge off of the Rick in the movie, which I feel is missing.
Yeah, I really think it's a failure because again, in the book, you feel very much. At least what I was feeling was that he's striving for some kind of connection to other people because he's talking to his neighbor while he's caring for his electric sheet because you got to keep up appearances or whatever, and he is in this kind of weird raw emotional state where he's kind of talking to his neighbor and he reveals that his sheep is fake or whatever, and it's almost like he's just asking his neighbor to help him out in that situation, but his neighbor's just oh, that's unfortunate, and then kind of just moves on. And so it's this kind of desperate need for attention that kind of continues all the way kind of throughout the book, which, does ultimately lead to him having sex with Rachel, which she does in the movie too. But it's a lot more excusable and almost kind of sad and pitiful, where you're okay, this person is, clearly almost destroyed, emotionally, let him have some robot coochie. Whereas I think in the book, it's a lot less. Or in the movie, it's a lot, he's an asshole throughout the entire thing. And there's that weird, I hated the sex scene in the movie because it's kind of like rapey.
Well, yeah, it's like in the book. The book has a weird thing about describing women's bodies as like young, but other than that, the scene is consensual. But it's an affair because he's married in the book. But the actual sex itself is consensual. In the movie, it's like almost unambiguously rape, which is not fun to watch or necessary to the plot of the movie, as far as I can tell. So. Yeah, it's rough.
Also in the movie, it's like, also in the book, he's like a second-rate bounty hunter. Like, the best one is like Holden, who's the one who gets shot, and both at the beginning of the book and the beginning of the movie. Whereas in the movie, he's the best one around that retired or got fired or quit or something, and Holden's like the second best person over there. So like this is weird dynamic where like Book Decker's trying to be like a badass, whereas like Book Deckard is not a badass, whereas Movie Deckard is trying to be a badass, and it kind of like inverts their character point.
I almost feel like there's this tension in the movie's writing between like adapting and carrying over some of the themes of the book versus like really, really desperately wanting to ape the classic tropes from noir movies. Mm-hmm. So like they flatten out Deckard's character and make him, the disgruntled retired cop who comes back for one last job, because that's what happens in detective movies. And
yeah, whereas in the book, you get a lot more of his emotions. You're almost like doing the kind of emotional test on him as you're going about doing it. Right. And he actually does take his own test at the end or in the middle of it. And
he does take it in the middle of the book?
I'm pretty sure the implication is that he fails it.
Okay. I was going to ask, where do you stand on in each individual adaptation? Is Deckard human or replicant or deliberately ambiguous? And we'll never know. In the book versus the movie.
I mean, I think in the movie, there's not really a question of him being a replicant. I mean, there's that line where it's like, what would you do if you... Okay.
It's a big debate for the movie. And actually, there are some people who don't like the final cut because in theory it confirms that he is a replicant in the movie. Because he has that dream about the unicorn. Mm-hmm. And then in the very last scene at the Tyrell Corporation, he picks up a little origami unicorn that Tyrell had made, which, is in theory confirms that Tyrell, who makes the androids, knows what Deckard is dreaming about.
I didn't pick up on that. I'm not entirely convinced. That doesn't really convince me.
Yeah, I think it's a stretch to say that it definitely confirms it, but I think it makes it more obvious that the movie is at least considering it.
I mean, they don't do anything with it if they just try to put it up at the very end. So I mean, it's kind of a worthless kind of like twist.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in the movie or in the book, he's hunting down the different androids, and he goes and tries to kill one of them or test one of them, and the android calls a cop on them, and the cop comes and like arrests him and takes him to a place, and it's like it's this whole sequence, and I think it's a beautiful sequence because I was actually kind of genuinely like, okay, where is this book going in this moment? Because there's like the one point where I was like, the first little bit of the book is very like obvious and kind of where it's going, and then you have this twist of like, okay, is he a replicant that is just has these false memories implanted, and he goes to like, a different kind of police station and a different kind, everyone's like, he can't contact his wife, he can't contact people at his supposed like police department. So it's okay, there's all these clues that are like, okay, he's imagining things, he's delusional, maybe he's not a replicant, but he's probably suffering some kind of brain issue.
To clarify, because I'm not sure for anyone who hasn't read it, he gets apprehended and then taken to a police office where no one at that police office acts like they've ever heard of the police office that he operates under.
And then I was like, okay, this could be interesting. I think I'm more disappointed in this book if he's supposed to be an android. I think while I was kind of like curious about, very interested in kind of the twist of that happening in like the middle of the book. I was very much like, I don't think this book would be as good if the whole point of the book was him kind of grappling with him being an android. Because I think part of the book's thing is that like the androids almost don't really matter in a lot of ways. Like, this is not true in the movie, but in the book, the androids are very, very robotic. They're not really kind of showing a lot of emotion. They're not really kind of a team per se. They don't really feel empathy for their other partners. They're still part of a community, unlike everyone else in the book, but they don't have an emotional connection.
They're human enough to impersonate them, but the book is pretty clear about like that legitimately they don't feel empathy. Like, it's an obvious distinction that they actually do lack. Whereas I think the movie mainly just doesn't get into it at all, so it doesn't have an opinion one way or the other. But
at the very beginning, it's like, well, what are these Nexus 6 brains going to do when they can start? Some people think they can start developing emotions, which is why we have a 4-year time limit on them.
Right.
Whereas in the book, it's less that like they genuinely feel emotions, and it's just that they're better at masking it. And it's possible at the beginning of the book that the test they want to do won't work anymore. Not because they feel emotions, but because they've gotten better at kind of faking the test results. So, the thought is that, you would have to design a new test, and they don't have time for that.
Yeah.
And thankfully it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or thankfully the test does work for them.
Right. And they even have gone through multiple tests and have a couple different tests active at the time of the book, depending on like who you work for or whatever.
Yeah. But, it's revealed, later that the police people who arrested him are, androids who are kind of masking as police so they can protect their own kind.
Also, with the 4-year lifespan, so in the movie they talk about, like you said, they have a 4-year lifespan because they don't want any one robot to like develop emotions or get too advanced. In the book, that's not the case. They do have a limited lifespan, but it's just because like the technology is not there yet.
You get a little bit about that in the movie, like when Roy goes and sees Tyrell and is like, why can't you make me live longer or whatever?
And I thought that in this movie, which again I think is okay, that probably was the most effective scene to me that was added compared to the book.
You mean it's the one part where they have like an actual theme going through it, where it's like, oh, this person's fearing death?
Yeah, and confronting like his equivalent of God.
And then smashes or kisses him and then smashes his brains in. I wrote in my notes.
That's the second movie I've seen. The second movie I've seen in a calendar week where people get their eyes gouged out to kill them.
What was the first one?
28 Days Later.
Not seen it.
It was pretty good. I thought it was maybe a missed opportunity that Pris and Rachel aren't the same exact model. Like, they don't have the same actress, so they're not the exact same model anymore.
That's another like kind of, I don't actually know if it's really a twist in the book, but like you see Rachel first and you learn that she's a replicant, and then you see Pris, who starts going by Rachel but then changes her mind and goes by Pris, and you're like, okay, it's Rachel who ran away from the company or whatever. And then it's later revealed that no, she maybe didn't run away from the company, and it's kind of like this weird kind of like, what's going on here? And then it kind of makes sense that there's two versions of them that look exactly the same, because of course they're mass-produced androids.
Right. And they like wear their hair differently or some, there are like ways to distinguish between those two specific ones, but other than that, they're the same, like
they got the same facial structure.
Right. So it seemed like it would have been easy to do in the movie. You would just give one person more of a part, because I don't think they're on screen at the same time ever.
No, I don't think so.
And even if you didn't address it directly, it could have added a little something. As it is, I did not like Pris specifically in this movie.
Who she reminds me a lot of? The girl from The Fifth Element, because she's doing backflips all the time. She got the orange hair.
Yeah. It just seemed like, I guess, to get to my like number one, I think we've been dancing around this, which is just like, the movie is like an hour and 50 minutes of just like a noir action movie where he has to hunt down 4 targets. And then there's like one monologue with a little bit of like emotion behind it. And people act like it's like asking all these grand questions, but like none of the questions have even been hinted at for the first hour and 50 minutes of the runtime. So
yeah, so I just don't know why they thought that what we wanted was, you know, a cop movie for like the majority of it. Like,
and
yeah,
like,
it's a genre or whatever, but like the genre is not the purpose. The purpose is, you know, the thinking that goes into it.
Yeah, and like the whole angle of like, well, you know, you're killing all these people, but all these androids, but like they're just like you and me, they're humans, you know, is it really moral to do that, you know, and erase these lives and experiences, is a lot less, there's a lot less weight to it and meaning to it when all the people you're killing have been running around like Bond villains, you know, like they're just like menacing and annoying and violent. And it's like, well, I watch movies where people like that get killed and I'm not supposed to question it, which, you know, maybe that's not right. But like in the book, you know, in the book, the androids have done like the mutiny or something bad. Like they probably have killed a lot of people before they get to LA. But in the book where you experience them as the reader, you only see them as their little cadre that doesn't really do anything wrong, you know, until they get pressured and threatened.
I don't know, Josh. They do torture that spider.
Yeah, but again, that was like once things were heating up on them. But yeah, that was wrong of them. But so it just felt weird because it's like the movie wants to like have its cake of just being like a stylish action movie and then eat it too with like, you know, Roy Batty killing his overlord and giving a monologue. But those two scenes don't really connect to like anything else that happens on screen during the runtime.
It almost feels like there's 2 separate movies going on where you have like the android movie, which would be compelling in its own right, and then you have, you know, the Deckard movie going on, which is interesting or fun to watch, but not really like that compelling. And they can't put them together in a way that makes it so that they both enhance each other. They're just kind of both there. And even the second part, even the first, you know, the android dream is not really all that there because, again, they're all just kind of violent murderers.
Right.
Except for the lady who has sex with a snake.
Yeah, the lounge performer who's not... She's the equivalent of an opera singer that's in the book. And the opera singer, again, was just a more interesting take because it deals with this, like, she thought being famous would, like, keep her safe and...
which has, like, certain implications, you know, in today's society of where, you know, people get stalked because they're famous.
And Rick is like really into opera, which again is like an element that would have made his character seem more human, but he doesn't have a personality in the movie.
There's just like so many moments in the book where it's like it's kind of clear that like, or there's like at least explanations for explaining why the replicants are doing seemingly human things, where like, you know, they're singing opera, like that's a very, you know, music in the arts, we associate that with humans and not like creatures and creations. And so it's like, oh, she's doing it for safety because she thinks if she's in the public eye, she'll be safer. So it's like, okay, here's a logical explanation for, you know, them doing something kind of slightly weird or irrational. Right. And it's every time one of those things happens, you know, it's a moment where Deckard gets a little bit more like, okay, I don't like this as much as I used to. Can we please move on to something that I can, you know, just kind of shoot in the face? And it just keeps happening and happening and happening until like
he has to
at the very end where he's like,
that it's wrong of him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you have the psychopath bounty hunter who's like, they're just droids, shoot them.
Yeah, it's like the book, it feels like every encounter he has, you know, the author has thought, you know, what is something that will challenge Rick's perception of humanity and these androids and the readers. And, you know, so he's got them in performance. He's got like, you know, the duplicates because that adds another layer, you know, things like that. And the movie, it's like every chance it has to take what's surprising about the book and interesting about the book makes it less challenging and less surprising. Like instead of an opera singer who's like well known and famous and really good, it's a sex worker, because we can imagine, oh, if we had robots, they would probably turn them into sex workers. You know, like it's just a trope.
Which, I mean, is true in the book too, I think. I mean, it's like looked down upon.
Right.
And it might actually be illegal in the books. I'd have to go back through and look at that section to know for certain. But it's one of those things where it's like the implication is that people still do it.
Yeah.
Also, did you catch the part in the... This is very off topic. Did you catch the part in the book where they're like, it's just like our Southern heritage in pre-Civil War South or whatever, when they're talking about the colonies?
Yeah. That's one of the few notes I made as I was reading, was like they directly reference chattel slavery as like the inspiration behind having the androids do their work, which again is like...
I mean, there's so much in the book where it's like, it's actively, or it's not, maybe it's probably less actively, more passively being like, okay, the androids are probably smart enough that we probably should not use them as slaves. Whereas, like, in the movie, there's absolutely none of that conversation going on, because the only androids we ever see are the ones that are murdering people.
Exactly, yeah.
How would you have included... Do you think that this movie could exist with, like, Mercerism as a concept happening somewhere in this movie? Like, with an empathy box and everything?
Yes. But again, I think it's one of those things where it's like, it wouldn't be as much of a noir, and apparently the filmmakers just were not interested in compromising on that aspect to the detriment of what they lifted from the book. Like, I think it would just become more of a... Like, it would almost... Like, I could see a version... And maybe I'm just thinking this because the sequel directed by Denis Villeneuve exists. Like, it would be more like Dune. Like, if they had included that much detail. Like, it would be slower paced and more, like, thinky. So...
Well, God forbid we get that. Sorry, Mercer, forgive...
So, are we ready to move on to the rating system?
What do you think of Sebastian's toys? That's the only other thing that I thought was kind of interesting, because it was like a brand new addition, but it like makes sense in the context of like, here's this person who's living all alone, like Isidore is the person he's supposed to be he's kind of pulling from, where he's like desperate for a friend, a colleague, and it's like these weird like toys he makes.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it. All I had really noticed is it was different than his job in the book, because his job in the book is being he's a vet for the electronic animals. So like there's this whole scheme where like the vets act like they're real vets and like have vans that make them look like real vets, but they're actually technicians that fix animals. Obviously that wouldn't have fit in the movie because it spends so much less time on the animals. So I guess I didn't really think too much of, like, I didn't think, that's not one where the change like hurt it necessarily to me, but
it kind of pulls from that idea where he's like a person who works on these like robotic kind of things.
Right. He's still tinkerer. I thought it was interesting that they kept the detail that he like failed medical to go off world. Mm-hmm. But he is like a genetic designer, which you would think is a very educated job, because in the book he has some sort of mental disability. But I guess in the movie the implication is just that he was not medically fit. Like,
no,
physically.
He's got like they mentioned this. He's got a glandular issue where he's got Methuselah syndrome, which I don't know if it's a real syndrome or not, but it causes his glands to age faster than they should.
Okay. So yeah, again, it's interesting because I guess it would be a tough minefield to walk if you added these details to a movie today, the way it worked in the book, because the book kind of uses the idea of being like mentally or emotionally disabled in some way as like, is that a lack of connection? Like, is there possible that you're not able to make connections in the same way, and does that make you more like the androids? And I think overall, it's a like.
I think it's a positive message. Because
yeah, I was gonna say, I think overall
Isidore,
it's relatively sympathetic, but it would be hard to do it in a politically correct way.
Yeah. Well, my whole thought process around that was that like Isidore's like the only person who like genuinely cares about like living things in this book that we see in like an earnest, like non-commercial way. Like Deckard wants a live animal, maybe for connection, but maybe also for prestige, whereas he kind of just wants it for companionship. And he's, you know, I think the interesting thing is that he finds the spider, and the spider is the, you know, a creature that we don't normally associate with like a lot of love, because they're kind of scary or whatever. And he sees it as like the greatest thing in you know his life, because they're rare, you know, and it's something that he can have that's like just for him.
Yeah. Well, they do mention that everyone in that society keeps a little pillbox to like safely capture insects, and like even Rick is like, man, I'm so jealous that he found a real live animal.
I mean, again, I'm not saying that like he just seems like the most pure
sincere
part of everyone in the book.
Again, I'm saying like then you run the risk of like Forrest Gump syndrome, where it's like you're just patronizing and, you know, portraying a caricature.
I think, you know, if this movie were made today, you'd see a lot of discussion about neurodiverse people who the way they perceive empathy and react to things is, you know, not how. Because honestly, I feel like if I took this test, there's a good chance I would fail.
Yeah, and like there even is, they briefly convince Rick that Rachel is not a robot. She's just like, they say schizophrenic.
I thought it was because she had some kind of trauma, but maybe that was also part of the schizophrenia.
Well, I think the book is kind of imprecisely using schizophrenia to mean like all conditions such as autism, Down syndrome, depression, like, because the author just didn't know better at the time.
Yeah.
So,
and it's one of those things that I think if this book were made today, you'd see a lot more looking at that kind of aspect of it. Because I was surprised. That's like the one surprise I guess I still have, is that never once did he accidentally kill someone who was not an android. And I get that like that's not really the purpose of the book, or the movie. But I feel like if it was made today and it wasn't already bound by the IP it already is, you would see at some point he would very genuinely believe or actually, you know, kill a human person, have to deal with the ramifications of that. But that kind of leans more into like the, you know, the whole system is kind of corrupt or kind of broken, and it's not really like a fair system.
But I think it's actually the better choice that doesn't happen, because I feel like if that does happen, that would subsume the whole plot, and it would become, this is bad because I accidentally killed a real human. Whereas the book that exists, it's like, this is bad because I've realized, you know, that
all life is sacred, even if
what
it
I
doesn't
thought
look like...
what I thought defines life is not what really does, and I'm
not necessarily saying that I think the movie or book that was made today would be better than the movie or book that we have. I'm just saying I think this is where it would go. I mean, it would depend on whether or not it's kind of played down as like a human error kind of situation, or it's like a, you know, systemic issue, and whether or not you're supposed to believe that he's a replicant at all, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, even just like my conclusion as far as the book is concerned, as we talk about it, is like, even with like, you know, the somewhat imprecise handling of, you know, mental health issues, and like women are not always the most agency having characters in it. It's just
listen,
like,
it's a noir book. You know, it's a part of the genre.
But like overall, it's just like such an enjoyable book to read, and like so thought provoking and entertaining, and like it's just like hard to be mad at it because I liked it so much. So it's like definitely one of the better books I've read in recent memory.
I mean, I just like the whole thing of like electric animals just never would have come to my mind. Because I also kind of thought that the title of it was like a kind of a thing of like, oh, androids are electric, so their dreams must also be electric of some kind.
Right. I thought the title was just a clever way of saying, do androids have human thoughts? Like, so.
I mean, to be fair, it kind of is, but,
Yeah.
It's also like, there's electric sheep in here.
But it's also like 50% of the text of the book.
I mean, we only briefly touched on kind of the environmentalistic kind of like aspect of this book, where it's like also commercialized, but that's probably a tale for another time. Is there anything like that in the 2049?
The only strong memory I have of it, and I don't want to spoil it in case we do cover it soon or eventually, it just has a lot more of the barren, like desolate vibe that the book portrays.
I know nothing about the movie. I always got the impression, just from looking at it, and this is before I read the book, so I didn't realize that the dust was kind of like part of the Earth setting. I always thought they were on Mars.
Yeah, I could see that for the sequel.
But I guess it's not.
Yeah. So, as far as our rating goes, I feel like this is an easy one to assign the game to. It's Donkey Kong, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like
this is about as complex and heady as at least sci-fi books get.
Yeah, and like so much of it is wrapped up in internal monologue or internal like thoughts that trying to get that out effectively in a movie just sounds so difficult.
Yeah, and you have this is a book where a mass religion gets exposed as like a hallucination, and then the main character still has a revelatory experience with it, and that's effectively the B plot, so there's just a lot going on, so it would be a challenge to adapt it.
I think it would be you see a lot more success, I think, in adapting it through a television series, like a limited 8 episode series or something like that, where you could kind of deal with each part a little bit at a time.
Yeah, I could see that structure working. Especially, you kind of have it fed to you, at least the middle bits, with there's 6 targets to get to,
Mm-hmm.
And so then we've played our hand here. Not that we try to keep it a secret, but as far as
it's a bad adaptation.
I know, in general, we would just both say it doesn't complete the game. It didn't beat it. But do you have a more specific rating than that in mind?
Can I explain this in a way that's convoluted and doesn't make sense to anybody but myself? It's the Devil May Cry 4 of the Devil May Cry series of video games.
Okay. I was just going to say, I guess this is what we've been trying to avoid, which is just getting into, numerical ratings, but I was going to give it, a 60 or 70%. I do think in a vacuum, if the book did not exist or I had never heard of the book, it's a perfectly entertaining, work of movie making, but it does not meet the challenge of bringing what works and what's interesting and thematic about the book to the screen.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's it was, they aimed high, and what they accomplished was they built a really tall tower, but it's still not reaching space or whatever, and it needs to reach space to even begin to get there.
Right. And I feel like people might listen to this and think, well, it's just not similar enough, but it's still, it's still good. But it's we have given a positive appraisal of movies that were very different from their book, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit still is a good example. It's even a detective noir parody that captured the vibe of what it was adapting well enough that how different it was not as relevant. And this does not accomplish that in the same way.
I think all it really captures is I don't even really want to say the aesthetic, because I think the aesthetic is wildly different, where it's like this weird, like, Tokyo-esque LA, and the book is like a desolate earth.
Right.
It's just like
the movie deserves some of its own like credits. Like visually, it looks really good, and it helped to like invent the cyberpunk aesthetic. But that's like separate from being an adaptation of the novel that it's based on.
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's a bad adaptation. And like, I feel like if I had seen this movie before reading the book, I would be a lot more sympathetic to the movie. But I read the book first, and, you know, I was reading it, and I only read like 3 chapters a day because I was doing other things at the time, and I was like, okay, maybe I can read 4 chapters this time or whatever, because like I stopped right whenever he got arrested, and I was like, I can't believe I'm stopping right here because I really want to know what's going to happen. Whereas in the movie, I felt like I was a lot more like just kind of passively sitting there, kind of watching.
That's our episode, I think. I'll add a more definite stinger about what we're going to watch next time here, I guess, when we've officially decided.
Yeah. It'll either be Blade Runner 2049 or Pride and Prejudice, so you could do both
lazy,
of them.
So most likely Blade Runner 2049. But
well, it just works better in my schedule, Josh.
Okay. I can get started on reading Pride and Prejudice so that we are ready for it eventually.
Yeah. We've done so many like dude films. We need to get back to the chick lit.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Joshua from the future on his AirPods, and next month's episode will in fact be Blade Runner 2049.
Okay, and that's all, folks. As always, we'd like to give credit to those that made this podcast possible, those that worked on the adaptation. Good job, I guess. A great big thanks for making the world just a little bit more artful. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Join us next time as we do probably Blade Runner 2049.